Hi, I'm Raimi. It's nice to meet you.
How did Godzilla come to be and why was it created?
Oh boy, well for that, we have to go back to 1954. And it was in response to a couple of things that were happening at the time in 1954. There was a big typhoon that created an incident that was called the Toyamaru incident. The other thing was that the hydrogen bomb tests in the Bikini Atolls, and it made everyone very sick. And so the combination of these two things led the producer, Tomiyuki Tanaka, who was a producer at Toho Studios. And so based on these incidents that happened at sea, he came up with the idea for this monster movie. And fortunately, he got in contact with Eiji Tsuburaya, who was the special effects director, and he had an idea to make a monster movie too. So it was fortunate that these two people, the producer, Tanaka, and the special effects director, Tsuburaya, both had the idea in mind to make a monster movie. And so it just kind of came together there in the middle of 1954. The first Godzilla movie was a response to both the atomic bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, as well as the more recent, in 1954, the hydrogen bomb test. So yeah, Godzilla was a response to both the atomic bomb and the hydrogen bomb, both at the same time, yeah. So it sort of depends where you look for what his origin story is, but if you just go back to that first film in 1954, yeah, he was just a dinosaur who was possibly in hibernation for a long time and then was awoken by the hydrogen bomb test. That most recent one, the Godzilla -1, was a really interesting one, I thought, because it kind of went back to the original 1954 film, but it tweaked the origin again, just a little bit. It was the small-sized dinosaur and it stomped on an island. And then we saw directly that it got hit by the hydrogen bomb blast. And then it very quickly grew incredibly giant. So that was an interesting take. We saw it actually grow. Well, we didn't see it on screen, but we understand that it grew very fast. So that was interesting, yeah. Design really changed a lot. When you go back to that first film, and the costume was the costume was basically made of plastic, that very first one. And you can tell when you're watching the movie that the actor inside couldn't move very much. As the manufacturing methods got better, so for example, they started using rubber and latex, the actor had a lot more freedom to move, and so Godzilla became more expressive, more able to sort of convey emotions.
Yeah,
and so they changed the face. Let's see. I think the most peculiar Godzilla designs came in the 70s, when they started to really kind of humanize Godzilla, and his face just becomes much more, it's less terrifying and more almost comical in a way. So those are kind of, I think, the most unique Godzilla designs, where Godzilla becomes much more friendly to kids. I love that Shin Godzilla design. I like that he can shoot those lasers from all over the place. That is a great question about how he is a symbol. So a symbol meaning that it can embody lots of different ideas. So for example, in that most recent movie, the Godzilla -1, the director said that he wanted Godzilla to represent an unknowable fear, as opposed to an easy to understand fear. I think that's an interesting distinction. Again, showing that Godzilla could represent lots of different things symbolically. And just the idea of, well, this goes back to actually, in the post-war years, there was in Japan, a whole sort of genre of poetry that was called atomic bomb poetry. And so you had people they wrote about the experience of going through the atomic bomb. And what they were trying to describe was how it was ineffable, meaning that it can't be put into words. And yet they were paradoxically trying to put it into words. And so a monster is a great symbol of that, of something that you can't describe. You just have to experience it and see it visually. I think that's why it worked so well. And the filmmakers themselves, when they created Godzilla, one interesting thing that they did was, it was based on the dinosaur. It was most likely Akira Watanabe was the art director who created the Godzilla design, and he had the texture of the skin looking like the keloids, which are the scars that the atomic bomb victims had. And it's an interesting story how they did that in real life when it came time to make the actual Godzilla costume, is that they actually sent a representative to America to research different manufacturing methods that maybe they didn't have yet in Japan. And what this guy came back with was synthetic rubber that they didn't yet have in Japan. And that turned out to be the perfect thing to add to the Godzilla costume to make those little marks, the very fine, detailed, textured marks. So yeah, that was really on their mind. How can this monster represent this thing that, this horrible disaster that can't be represented in any other way except visually and experientially. You have to experience it in order to really understand it. So yeah, the monster is a great symbol for that.